Um, all right. Well, as people kind of keep coming on, I will just kind of jump in. I'm going to apologize because I most likely will not look at any questions or like comments until I get to the end because I've got to like awkwardly split screen my computer so I can see my notes because apparently I wrote an entire novel because why wouldn't I? Because it's me. Um, I'm also going to apologize in advance because I have a really cool sippy top water bottle because apparently I'm 5. So you're going to hear the weird sounds of that and I'm going to apologize. But I'm excited for this and I wasn't. And I kind of want to talk about how I ended up in this position. I did not want to go live. Everybody and their grandmom has been going live because everybody has the ability to and everybody's home alone. I live stream from the very like for a living basically, and especially the past 2 weeks since the entire Christian church has gone digital, so have I, even more so than normal at work. So the last thing I wanted to do was live stream at home and be on the other end of a camera talking about my own life. But I kind of wanted to just lead into this time. I'm hoping to stay around 35 minutes. I can't make any promises. But I want to kind of talk about what's been going on in my life that's kind of led me to this point and why this message, I think God really impressed upon my heart to share with us in this time. So a couple months ago, I'm very open about the fact that I'm in counseling. It has been the best decision I've made in my life. And I was talking to my counselor and we both kind of just agreed that unfortunately I needed to be stepping out of youth ministry. If you know me, I went to college for youth ministry. It was what I thought I was going to be doing my entire life. I thought it was my career. And then I got a job at Alliance Youth. And then I am now doing digital media and marketing. And only God, that's all I can say. But I've been doing youth ministry for 7 years. And all of a sudden now I'm stepping away, even just as a volunteer. So that was a transition for me. With the purpose of it was so that I could take time for myself, not be pouring out into so many people, and have time for myself that I could actually really invest in counseling and what was happening there and dig into not just what's going on in me personally, but what's been going on in my life and my past. So my last week of youth group was supposed to be the first night that youth group was canceled. And it was when all of this stuff kind of started hitting the fan. And I remember the next day, like the day after I was supposed to have youth group, one of my students texted me and was like, isn't it funny that like, because I was honest with my students about why I was stepping away. She was like, you needed time for yourself. And now all of a sudden, like everybody's in their houses and they're locked up and they're all alone. And I'm like, thank you, child. That's fantastic. But she's not wrong. I joked with my therapist that it only took an international pandemic for me to actually slow down. If you know me, if you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a 7. Doesn't surprise anyone when I say that. But I very much like to go, do, and I can't do that anymore. So I've had this abundance of alone time, and God has been speaking and revealing things to me, even just because it's such a high stress time. I sit at my work. If you saw how many sticky notes were on my desk, you would be terrified. And a good portion of them are just things that as I'm interacting through my day, I'm seeing myself interact with things and I'm writing things down that I feel like he's speaking. And it's been crazy the past few weeks. What I do is digital media. My team also, like I'm on social media and podcasting and live streaming. They do email and web programming and web design. And we've been swamped because everything's going digital. And that aside, when I knew quarantine was going to be happening, if you see this wonderful giant sticky note back here, this is my quarantine checklist because another Enneagram 7 trait, I was like, this is going to be awesome. Like I can make new disciplines for myself. I can learn how to make oat milk and like all this stuff that I was like, I'm going to do a puzzle and make this fun because I have to have fun. And it was fun until it wasn't fun anymore. And it was fun until I got done my days and I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I've got like 30 unread text messages right now because I get done all my Zoom meetings and I'm like, Jesus, please, I can't talk to another person. I put so many expectations on myself stepping into the season, and it's only been like 2-3 weeks. Of I wanted to put expectations on what I wanted to do, and those things have kind of started to change. And I genuinely thought I'd be fine with everything going on, and I didn't think I was stressed, and I didn't think I would need to grieve. And I do, and I am, and I did. I didn't think that this season would be exposing so much brokenness in my own life that I needed to grieve. And right now, I think everybody has some kind of a loss, and we all have to grieve in some way. And that's why I kind of just like off the cuff called this Reclaiming Grief, because we assume that grief is bad because it feels bad. But what I want to talk about tonight really is what the purpose is in that grief. And I know I'm not the only one that's been dealing with the same thing lately. A friend of mine that I know through work, her name is Sarah. She does many, many things. One of the things that she does in her spare time is poetry. And she wrote a poem called We've All Been Exposed, talking about exactly what I'm just saying, how the coronavirus and the situation has exposed the dark parts of us, the ugly parts of us, the parts that we would rather ignore, and that when our lives are normal, we can. And her poem got 55,000 shares, and she just like posted it on her personal profile, and she went viral. So I know I'm not the only one that's dealing with this. The whole world is in a similar situation, even though it looks really different. People are losing jobs and benefits. This was another reason I didn't want to do this today, but our office today, we announced some layoffs and some hour cuts and some pay cuts to all of us, and it's been hard. Obviously, we all have feelings about that, but there's also people that are going hungry, and more people are dealing with anxiety and depression on higher levels than normal, and people are dying, and people are dying without family at their sides. It's causing families to change, lives are changing, and we are changing because of the situation, and we are all ready for this to be done. We want our lives back. We want control. I think that's the biggest thing we can all be grieving is like, we don't have control right now. We want our normal expected routines. But what I've been reminded of in this season is that when things are thrown into disarray and chaos, God moves, and he's always moving. But I think when we are out of our normal, like blinder routine, we see it more. Part of what I get to do at work is I'm constantly seeing and sharing stories, and it's just been so cool to see how churches are growing and expanding because of live stream services and Zoom small group meetings and all of these innovative things. Church isn't going to be the same after this. God is already moving, but I'm sure many of us in some regards, like God is moving for other people, but we might be calling a time out because we don't think he's moving in our own lives. Some of our circumstances right now seem completely hopeless. We feel broken and we feel lost. And sometimes when we cry out to Jesus, we feel like nothing's happening. We feel abandoned. We feel like he doesn't love us, like he's not there. And there's a story that I want to go through today in John 11 that I think speaks the opposite of that. So if you have a Bible, I'm reading the Message version. I'm reading John 11, 1-44. Because it's the Message version, it reads significantly differently than like an NIV or an ESV. So feel free to just like follow along with me, or you can look in your Bible too. We're going to be reading the first 44 scriptures all together. I know that's a lot, but we're going to break it down. So just hang tight with me. We're going to go verses 1-16 first. It says, a man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. This was the same Mary who massaged the Lord's feet with aromatic oils and then wiped them with their hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So her sisters sent the word to Jesus, Master, the one you love so very much is sick. When Jesus got the message, he said, the sickness is not fatal. It will become an occasion to show God's glory by glorifying God's Son. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, but oddly, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed on where he was for 2 more days. After the 2 days, he said to the disciples, let's go back to Judea. They said, Rabbi, you can't do that. The Jews are out to kill you and you're going to go back. Jesus replied, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in daylight doesn't stumble because there's plenty of light from the sun. Walking at night, he might very well stumble because he can't see where he's going. He said these things and then announced, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep and I'm going to wake him up. The disciples said, Master, if he's gone to sleep, he'll get a good rest and he'll wake up feeling fine. Jesus was talking about death, while his disciples thought he was talking about taking a nap. Then Jesus became explicit. Lazarus died, and I'm glad for your sakes that I wasn't there. You're about to be given new grounds for believing. Now let's go to him. That's when Thomas, the one called the twin, said to his companions, come along, we might as well die with him. There's a lot in those scriptures, but Jesus finds out, first of all, that Lazarus, who it says here that he loves so very much, is very sick. And Jesus doesn't go heal him. He waits 2 days for him to die and says, it'll bring God glory. Okay, now we're going to go. He waits 2 full days and waits until he is fully dead to leave and go to heal him. We find out later he heals him. Imagine if you were sick and dying and one of your best friends or somebody that you love dearly had a miracle drug that would completely heal you, and they waited 2 days for seemingly no reason until you died. I don't know how Lazarus feels. I feel like if I were Lazarus and I knew Jesus was going to come, maybe I'd be a little frustrated, a little upset. I know I'm not the only one in life that has had things happen that make no logical sense, and we think God won't let that stuff happen to me. And then all of a sudden life happens, sin happens, this fallen world happens, and we're like, whoa, what? God, you let me lose my job when I was already struggling to pay bills. You let my grandparent get diagnosed with coronavirus and they're dying and I can't even be by their side to be with them because of all of this that's going on. For any high schoolers, God, you let my senior year get completely ruined and now I'm depressed because I'm alone and my grades are bad and I'm risking losing scholarships for college, because sometimes when bad things happen, it's a domino effect. God, why would you let this happen when I know that you could fix it? And then we see Thomas's snarky response. I love when the Bible gets snarky because I'm snarky and it makes me feel like it's okay sometimes. He says, well, let's go with him. We might as well die with him. Pretty deep. Don't we get that way with God sometimes? We're like, well, God, this is it. So I guess I'll just die with you. I guess that's all that's left for me. This is it. This is all I have. We think that, and it feels that way, but we know and we need to believe that that's never the end of the story, because our God is hope for the hopeless. So I'm going to pick back up again, starting in verse 17, and we're going to go to 35. When Jesus finally got there, he found Lazarus already 4 days dead. Bethany was near Jerusalem, only a couple of miles away, and many of the Jews were visiting Martha and Mary, sympathizing with them over their brother. Martha heard Jesus was coming and went out to meet him. Mary remained in the house. Martha said, Master, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask God, he will give you. She had faith of some kind. Jesus said, your brother will be raised up. Martha replied, I know that he'll be raised up in the resurrection at the end of time. You don't have to wait for the end, Jesus says, and says to her, I am right now, resurrection and life. The one who believes in me, even though he or she dies, will live. And everyone who lives believing in me does not ultimately die at all. Do you believe this? She answers, "Yes, Master. All along I believed that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who comes into the world." After saying this, she went to her sister Mary and whispered in her ear, "The teacher is here and is asking for you." The moment she heard that, she jumped up and ran out to him. Jesus had not yet entered the town, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When her sympathizing Jewish friends saw Mary run off, they followed her, thinking she was on her way to the tomb to weep there. Mary came to where Jesus was waiting and fell at his feet, saying, "Master, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." A second sister saying the same thing. When Jesus saw her sobbing and the Jews were with her sobbing, a deep anger welled up within him. He said, "Where did you put him?" "Master, come and see," they said. And now Jesus wept. So let's back it up. We see that Mary and Martha both tell Jesus, "Jesus, if you would have just shown up, he would have been alive." And I think we say similar things in our lives so many times. "Jesus, if you would have just shown up for me, everything would have been fine. I prayed and I asked you to keep my family member from getting sick. I prayed and I asked you to be able to have a graduation ceremony. If you would have just shown up and done that thing." It's like the story of the woman with the issue of bleeding, and she knows, like, "Jesus, I just need to touch the hem of your garment and I'll be healed." Sometimes we just need a small touch. And they're saying, "Jesus, we didn't need much. We just wanted you to show up and it would have been fine." And then Jesus continues the interactions, and it says that a deep anger welled up inside of him. Could Jesus be angry at their lack of faith? I don't really think so, because when I look at this, they both declare who Jesus is, and they both say, "Jesus, I know you would have had the power if you would have shown up." They just didn't understand the timing, but they believed in the miracle. They believed in the promise of healing. They knew that that was who Jesus was. So I don't think that was what angered him. I think the pain that he saw them in was what angered him. The fact that he, fully God and fully man, recognized that this world was fallen, and he was seeing the pain, and he was angry that this was the situation. He wasn't angry at them. Then, as Mary is sobbing, Jesus goes to the body of Lazarus, and what do we see him do? The shortest scripture that we see in the Bible. Jesus wept. So Jesus waited to come until he died, until it made no sense to anyone around him, until Lazarus was dead, and he wept over him, even though he knew the miracle that he was about to do. Jesus waited, he wept, but he knew that something else was still about to happen, but he wept anyway. I think this perfectly shows the humanity of who Jesus is. But can I also say, I think that this is also Jesus understanding and recognizing that his purpose for our lives sometimes causes us pain. And sometimes it's pain that feels unbearable. For the disciples, it cost them the security of traveling. It said in that first portion that we read, like, Jesus, they're trying to kill us. It cost Mary and Martha their brother, and it cost Lazarus his life. Lazarus had to die so that the purpose of God would be fulfilled. Because what else did it say? We saw this multiple times. Jesus says, God is about to get glory, and you're going to have another reason to believe. That was the purpose, and that's our purpose. We get so caught up in figuring out, God, what's my calling? What do you want me to do? What's my purpose? Our purpose is always to bring people to know who Jesus is, to give them another reason to believe, and to get God glory. That's our purpose. And the purpose of Jesus couldn't have been fulfilled in this situation had Lazarus not died and these people went through moments of deep pain and grief and fear. When I was prepping for this, I had put this on the internet. You may or may not have read it, but I had all of these thoughts and things that, like I said, all my sticky notes of things God had been teaching me, and I couldn't figure out how to pull it together. And my friend Jess, that I went to high school, well, we didn't go to high school together. I knew her when I was in high school. We don't talk often at all, but she messaged me this sermon that she had been reading, and she's like, I know you're a Christian and I know I'm Catholic, but I don't know why. I just felt like God impressed upon me to share this message with you. I hope it's not weird. I hope it's not offensive. I don't know if you cross denominational lines. I'm like, girl, I can learn from anybody about anything. Like, yes, I want to hear it. I was like, I'll totally listen. And it helped me completely pull this message together. So glory to God. But one of the things that this priest said, his name is Father Mike Schmitz, he said, sometimes Jesus would rather allow a heart that's broken than a heart that's lost. Sometimes, twofold. Sometimes our hearts have to be broken so that other hearts can be found, so that they aren't lost. And sometimes our hearts have to be broken so that our hearts aren't lost either, because we are like sheep that tend to go astray from Jesus. And sometimes the pain is the only thing that allows us in our lives to be dependent upon God. Sometimes that's the only way that we can be found. And I know that there's people that don't want to hear this. I am normally the person that's like, forget you. Like, I am in pain right now. I don't want to hear that God has a plan for it. I don't care about God's plan. And that's okay. You have freedom to be there. But all I'm saying is that you can find hope at some point, that a purpose will come. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's read the last couple verses, and then we'll wrap this up. And I have a liturgy I want to read. Starting again in verse 36. The Jews said, this is after Jesus wept over Lazarus. The Jews said, look how deeply he loved him. Others among them said, well, if he loved him so much, why didn't he do something to keep him from dying? After all, he opened the eyes of a blind man. Sidebar, but how many times do we get discouraged because we say, God, you've done miracles in other people's lives. Why aren't you doing it in my own? Then Jesus, the anger welling up within him, arrived at the tomb. It was a simple cave in the hillside with a slab of stone laid against it. Jesus said, remove the stone. The sister of the dead man, Martha, said, Master, by this time there's a stench. He's been dead 4 days. Jesus looked her in the eye. Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? Then to the others, he said, go ahead, take away the stone. They removed the stone. Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and prayed, Father, I'm grateful that you have listened to me. I know you always do listen, but on account of this crowd standing here, I've spoken so that they might believe that you sent me. Then he shouted, Lazarus, come out. And he came out, a cadaver wrapped from head to toe and with a kerchief over his face. Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. Unwrap him and let him go. Suddenly, because of Jesus's plan, they see the purpose. And now, thousands of years later, after this story happens, we get to see that purpose. We need to believe in the purpose of God in this season when we are all grieving the loss of something. The purpose God promised became reality. Did it become reality what we look at when we read this somewhat quickly, considering? Yeah. Does it always? No. I'm sure it felt like an eternity for them because these people had been weeping for 4 days. Put yourself in that position. Imagine somebody that you loved, your brother, your sister, a close friend, family member died. You had been weeping for 4 days, mourning, grieving. Imagine that. The purpose God promised became reality. And nobody understands what this feels like better than Jesus. And it's something we hear a lot. It's something that, for me, many times it's become cliche, but I want us to fast forward. We're going to jump to Matthew, but I'm going to fast forward us in the gospel to the Garden of Gethsemane. So I'm going to read, it's just a couple verses. If you have a Bible, you don't need to go there, but Matthew 26, verses 36 through 46. Then Jesus went with them to a garden called Gethsemane and told his disciples, "Stay here while I go over there and pray." Taking along Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he plunged into an agonizing sorrow. Other translations say that his soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Then he said, "The sorrow is here we go. The sorrow is crushing my life out. Stay here and keep vigil with me." Going a little ahead, he fell on his face praying, "My Father, if there is any way, get me out of this, but please not what I want. What do you want?" When he came back to the disciples, he found them asleep. I'm going to fast forward. He left them a second time. Again, he prayed, "My Father, if there is no other way than this, drinking this cup to the dregs, I'm ready. Do it your way." When he came back, he again found them asleep. This time he let them go sleep on and went back a third time to pray, going over the same ground one last time. When he came back to the next time, he said, "Are you going to sleep and make a night of it? My time is up. The Son of Man is about to be handed over into the hands of sinners. Get up, let's get going. My betrayer is here." At this point, he's saying, this is when it begins. He says, "My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. The sorrow is crushing my life out of me." He prays 3 times, "God, please, if there's any other way, if there's any other way, if there's any other way." How many times do we plead with God, "God, please just get me out of this. Any other way. If there's any other way, Lord, relieve me of this, make it happen." And that doesn't happen for Jesus. God doesn't do that for his own son. Fasting forward again to Matthew 27. Jesus on the cross at Calvary, verses 45 and 46. From noon to 3, the whole earth was dark. Around mid-afternoon, Jesus groaned out of the depths, crying loudly, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Jesus didn't want to die. He felt abandoned and alone and with every burden of the world on his shoulders. That means mine, the heaviness that I'm carrying right now, the heaviness that you're carrying right now, the heaviness that the rest of the world is carrying right now was on his shoulders, and he still gave his life. Why? Because the purpose was resurrection life, and the purpose couldn't be fulfilled without his pain. And I'm going to be bold in saying that sometimes these moments, actually all the time, these moments of deep pain and grief that we have in our lives make us more like Jesus than we can imagine. We are more like Jesus in pain and trial and temptation than when all things are going right in our lives. And maybe some of you feel comforted by that. Others of you are angry and wishing, before I gave my life to the Lord, I wish somebody would have told me that. Girl, guy, whoever's on the other end, nobody told me that my life was going to get harder when I knew Jesus. They only told me it was going to get easier. Some ways it was true, some ways it wasn't. Whatever you feel about this is valid. You can feel that way, and Jesus can handle you feeling that way. So take it to him and talk to him about it. But what I don't want you to hop off of this live stream missing is that your purpose is most like Christ in painful seasons. But that also means that he's just as close. When our purpose is aligned with his and we are aligned with him and we're so tight with him, that also means that he is so tight with us and he's close. Some of us right now are in pain and we know exactly why. I've listed many reasons. I don't know all of them. Everybody's experiencing life differently right now. Others of us, and this has been, I'm sorry, I'm going to read something up here in a minute. Some of us don't know exactly why. We've just felt this heaviness and we know things are going on around us, but we don't even know why we're feeling it in the depths that we are. No matter where you fall on that spectrum, another friend of mine from college shared a liturgy on Instagram Live a couple days ago that I fell in love with. And I ended up buying the book, but when you bought the book, you got a couple free ones. And I want to read this to you because I read it the other night and I just cried my way through it. Hopefully I won't do that now. But it's absolutely beautiful. It's from the book Every Moment Holy by Douglas McKelvey. McKelvey. There we go. Sound it out. Hooked on phonics. It's called A Liturgy for Those Who Weep Without Knowing Why. There's so much lost in this world, O Lord. So much that aches and groans and shivers for want of redemption. So much that seems dislocated, upended, desecrated, unhinged, even in our own hearts. Even in our own hearts, we bear the mark of all that is broken. What is best in this world has been bashed and battered and trodden down. What was meant to be the substance has become the brittle shell haunted by the ghosts of glory so long crumbled that only its rubble is remembered now. Is it any wonder we should weep sometimes without knowing why? It might be anything, and then again it might be everything. For we feel this. We who are your children feel this empty space where some lost thing should have rested in its perfection. And we pine for those nameless glories. And we pine for all the wasted stories in our world. And we pine for these present wounds. We pine for our children and for their children too, knowing each will have to prove how this universal pain is also personal. We pine for all children born into these days of desolation, whose regal robes were torn to tatters before they were even swaddled in them. Oh Lord, how can we not weep when waking each day in this vale of tears? How can we not feel those pangs when we, wounded by others, so soon learn to wound as well, and in the end wound even ourselves? We grieve what we cannot heal, and we grieve our half-belief, having made uneasy peace with disillusion, aligning ourselves with a self-protective lie that would have us kill our best hopes just to keep our disappointments half confined. We feel ourselves wounded by what is wretched, foul, and fell, but we are sometimes wounded by the beauty as well, for when it whispers of the world that might have been our birthright, now banished, now withdrawn, as unreachable to our wounded hearts as ancient seas receding down some endless dark. We weep, O Lord, for those things that, though nameless, are still lost. We weep for the cost of our rebellions, for the mocking and hollowing of holy things, for the inward curve of our souls, for the evidence of death outward in every field and tree and blade of grass, crept up in every creature, alert in every longing, infecting all fabrics of life. We weep for the leers our daughters will endure, as if to be made in reflection of your beauty were a fault for which they must pay. We weep for our sons, sabotaged by profiteers who seek to warp their dreams before they even come of age. We weep for all the twisted alchemies of our times that would turn what might have been gold into crowns of cheap tin and then toss them into refuse bins, as if love could ever be a cast-off thing one might simply be done with. We weep for the wretched expressions of all things that were first built of goodness and glory, but are now their own shadow twins. We have wept so often, and we will weep again. And yet, there is somewhere in our tears a hope still kept. We feel it in this darkness like a tiny flame when we are told Jesus also wept. You wept. So moved by the pain of this crushed creation, you, O Lord, heaved with the grief of it, drinking the anguish like water and sweating it out of your skin like blood. Is it possible that you, in your sadness over Lazarus, in your grieving for Jerusalem, in your sorrow in the garden, is it possible that you have sanctified our weeping too? For the grief of God is no small thing, and the weeping of God is not without effect. The tears of Jesus preceded a resurrection of the dead. O Spirit of God, is it then possible that our tears might also be a kind of intercession? That we, your children in our groaning with the sadness of creation, could be joining in some burdened work of coming restoration? Is it possible that when we weep and don't know why, it is because the curse has ranged so far, so wide, that we weep at that which breaks your heart, because it has also broken ours, sometimes so deeply that we cannot explain our weeping even to ourselves. If that is true, then let such weeping be received, O Lord, as an intercession newly forged of holy sorrow. Then let our tears anoint these broken things, and let our grief be as their consecration, a preparation for their promised redemption, our sorrow sealing them for that day when you will take the ache of all creation and turn it inside out, like the shedding of an old gardener's glove. O Lord, if it please you, when your children weep and don't know why, yet use our tears to baptize what you love. Amen. It got darker since I started reading that. Friends, my encouragement and my hope for us is that we not shy away from our grief, that we not put expectations on our grief, thinking that as soon as we grieve that things are going to change, because it's not true. It may be, but it might not be. But would we believe that when we weep, it is a prayer and it is an offering to God? It's an offering of us saying, this is who I am. This is what I have right now. And I give it to you. It is all I have. So I'm going to pray, and then I'll hopefully hop back over to the comments. And if anybody has questions or anything, let me know. Also, feel free to personal message me and we can chat if you want to talk more privately about anything. Father, I thank you for your word and its goodness and its power and its grace and its truth. I thank you that you have not limited our grieving just to words, but that tears are a way that we can communicate with you too. I thank you that even though pain is unbearable sometimes, that you don't abandon us in it and that you get glory for it. And would you help us and empower us to be able to withstand the pain so that we can bring glory to you and that more people would come to have relationship with you. God, would our grief be like a lighthouse to the people around us, that it would be oddly inviting and welcoming, that we are not putting a portrait up of perfection. I pray for each person, Lord, that what they need to grieve, they would grieve, including me, because I have a lot that I need to grieve, Lord, and you know that. Would we be honest and real with you, trusting that you take it all and you handle it all, and then it doesn't turn you away from us. It just gives us opportunities for you to love us. Thank you for who you are and for what you've done for us and the purpose of your redemption in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.